Okay, wie Sie vielleicht schon meinem Namen entnehmen können, ich bin Deutscher, but I would like to switch to English too, because we have here also international guests. To my background, so I worked the last 10 years in the lithium industry for the leading lithium company, Rockwood Lithium, now acquired by Albemarle. And at the beginning of this year, I founded my own consultancy, and I have an exclusive contract for Savannah Resources. And I would like to start with one slide for Savannah Resources. Savannah is an exploration company with different projects. One project, first of all, I have to mention that this company is listed at the AIM in London and also in Frankfurt. They have a lithium project in the northern part of Portugal. The stage is a feasibility stage, and we expect to be operational in the first half of 2020. This is the largest spodumene resource in Europe. We defined 20 million tons of ore with a good grade, but this resource statement is based only on 3 out of at least 10 spots we drilled at the moment. And we plan to produce 200,000 tons of spodumene concentrate. We published a scoping study this year, and the results are very, very encouraging. For instance, the payback time is less than 2 years. The cash cost is very economic, and there's also low capex involved. So now I would like to come more to market-related things. This is the reason why we are also interested in battery materials. It is the electric vehicle. And we expect in the coming years an exponential growth. And we can discuss how much will it be. There are several different publications out, but it will grow exponentially. And you can see here that one moment. Here's this dark blue bar. This is clearly dominated by China. But second, the light blue bar here is Europe. And there are tremendous opportunities for electric vehicles in Europe. I don't want to go into the details, but there is not only one lithium-ion battery type. There are several ones. But these two types, so-called NMC and NCA, are the lithium-ion battery types for electric vehicle. All battery types have their advantages, disadvantages for certain applications. Okay, now I would like to go into more detail for 4 different battery metals. I would like to start with cobalt. Interesting is that only 2% of the cobalt comes from primary cobalt mines. So typically it's a byproduct of copper mines and of nickel mines. And that means that you cannot increase the cobalt production without increasing either nickel or the copper production. And here in this slide, you can see that the cobalt mining is dominated by the Democratic Republic of Congo. At the moment, the market share is about 2/3, but this will grow up to 2021 to 75%. And that means there is no lithium-ion battery industry without DRC cobalt. This is the mining part of the value chain. And now I would like to go to the refining step. This is the next step in the value chain. And this value chain step is dominated by China. Roughly about 80% of chemical refining capacity is installed in China, and they are at the moment aggressively in an expansion phase. And that raises the question, of course, what does that mean for the cobalt supply to other regions? If the internal demand of China is extremely high, maybe there can be some restrictions in the future. The cobalt demand, here you can see that batteries at the moment play a significant role. You can see the consumer batteries with 37%, I think. And then we have here EV batteries, which accounts for 15% at the moment. So in total, roughly half of the total demand is going into batteries. The total demand is a little bit more than 100,000 tons. And this will increase significantly. Here is a figure from the famous Roskill market research company, and they expect that this will increase to 240,000 tons from the battery sector alone, which is at the moment 50% of that. It's massive. So that means we need more mines, we need more intermediate plants, and refined capacity. One interesting thing is that in principle it's possible from a technical perspective to transform every cobalt into battery-ready cobalt sulfate. But of course, if you have several steps involved, then it is not very favorable for the economics. But in principle, it's possible. So the question is, how can we have the supply following the demand? One thing is, but this is due to performance reasons, we see the trend that in lithium-ion batteries, the cobalt content becomes less, and the nickel content will increase. That's the reason behind that is because the energy density of nickel is higher, and that's very good for the performance of EV batteries. But this is not enough to keep the market in balance. So that means from early 2020, we expect there will be a deficit. So that means demand is higher than supply. The next market I would like to mention here is the nickel market. You can see here in total it's more than 2 million tons of refined nickel produced every year. And this is by far more than cobalt, for instance. So cobalt is just a byproduct of the nickel production. And here only 3% go into the battery sector. And in the nickel market, we have to distinguish between two things. There's a high purity product, so-called class 1, and there's a low purity product, so-called class 2, which goes into the steel industry. And it's roughly about half of all the nickel produced goes into the low purity applications. The nickel sulfate necessary for lithium-ion batteries will increase by far the most. And here's also a figure from Roskill. It will grow from 86,000 tons to more than 400,000 tons by 2027. That's tremendous. And that we also see there will be a growth in the stainless steel industry. And the question is, what about the availability of the high purity class 1 nickel? This is how it looks like. You can see stainless steel industry is dominating the nickel demand. But interesting here, you can see that also a portion of high quality product goes into low quality application. This is roughly 350,000 tons. And in principle, because the battery sector here will grow significantly, this is in principle available for class 1 applications. Then we have a relatively high inventory level at the moment. This could be reduced. And that means up to 2022, maybe the supply deficit will not be huge. But what about if we take a look to 2030, for instance? Here you can see the class 1 is only 22%. But in total, in absolute volume terms, it's not less than in what is today. But you can see the batteries in today it's 3%, and now it grows to 37%. And that means we need a lot of additional supply of the high purity product. And that means where will it come from? And I think in the next 5 to 10 years we will go into a deficit here. One reason for that is because of the high capital intensity of nickel projects. Especially the class 1 refining plants are very expensive to build. It's almost not possible to purify class 2 product. So let's say it like this: the nickel prices are not high enough at the moment to justify an investment in class 1 capacity. So the next battery metal I would like to talk to is lithium. First of all, lithium is an abundant resource. There's no shortage from the resource side. You can get lithium out of salt water, from salt lakes. This is mainly done in South America, Chile, Argentina, but also in China. Then you can source it from hard rock, it's so-called pegmatites. These pegmatites are mainly found in Australia and Canada, but also in many other regions of the world. So this is classical hard rock mining, and you can use the conventional processes to concentrate the ore. And the conversion step then is a high temperature process, followed by sulfuric acid leaching. And then there are a few purification steps, and then you can precipitate the lithium salt out of it. This is a photograph I like very much because this is the operation of SQM in the Salar de Atacama in Chile. And they harvest the lithium out of salt water, and they pump the water from below the ground into a pond system. And then, because it never rains in Chile, and therefore the sun will concentrate the solution. And in every pond, there will be a precipitation of certain salts. And that means it is not only a concentration process, it's also a purification process, simply done by evaporation from the sun. And at the end, you can see it here. This is a yellow-greenish color. This is a highly concentrated lithium chloride solution. Then the lithium chloride solution will be...
Just one question, how long does it take?
This takes roughly 18 months. 18 months, yeah. And then the lithium chloride solution will be transformed in a chemical plant into a lithium carbonate. And if you want to produce lithium hydroxide, you need an additional step. And lithium hydroxide is necessary for the coming high energy cathode materials. And there are 2 steps involved here. And with hard rock production, it's in principle possible to have it in 1 step. There are other technologies under discussion, but they are not in operation yet. The same in line with the electric vehicle growth, we will see a tremendous demand increase for lithium driven by the lithium-ion battery industry. And you can see here, today it's maybe a little bit more than 50% which goes into batteries. And this will grow, I don't know, to 80% or 75% in 2025. So this is a fundamental shift in the industry. By the way, we can discuss about is it in average 15% in total or 20 or something like that. I think it's difficult to have a fair projection. So what about lithium supply? We have a few very big existing producers, and they all announced expansions. But we also see a lot of newcomers coming into the market. I'm very interested to see the next speech here from LSC, for instance, as a newcomer company. And then I would like to say regarding supply, it takes long to bring a new mine into operation, especially with brine projects. These brine projects can last very long until they come into operation. This is accompanied by high investment costs, especially for brine projects. But then in general, the brine projects have lower operating costs as hard rocks. So financing is very critical to bring new lithium mines into operation. But this is not the only thing. There are also technological challenges. We could see in the past that many projects had massive delays. And it's also in some cases was not possible to reach the necessary quality of the product. And also sometimes it was not possible to reach the announced capacity. So in saying this, I would like to say if you hear that there will be an oversupply, I think this will not be true. So this is completely overestimated. I think the market will be more or less balanced, maybe slightly tight, depending on the demand growth. And that means for the strategy, I'm absolutely sure for car manufacturers and battery manufacturers, they need to secure raw materials, maybe through offtake agreements or partnerships, acquisitions, whatever. They have to secure raw materials, and the Chinese companies do it in a large scale. The last battery metal I would like to talk to is vanadium. Maybe you are surprised to hear that, but there is a new development for vanadium. There's the so-called vanadium redox flow battery. I have here a scheme how it works. The electrolyte is in big tanks, and the bigger the electrolyte tank, the more energy you have available. And then you have a stack, and the more stack or the bigger the stack is, the more power you have. But these are big batteries, and they are only suitable for stationary energy storage. And that means for grid storage, for peak shaving, frequency regulation, all these things. There are many applications for the grid, supporting the grid. And this is, you can see there is a strong competition from other battery types. And you can see here are the flow batteries with certain characteristics, but there are also sodium sulfur, or here's a lithium ion battery. And I think the lithium ion battery is very, very versatile. They have, this battery type is more flexible. So I would like to say there's a strong competition from lithium ion, from sodium sulfur, but also from other flow batteries. And I think vanadium redox flow is at the beginning of the commercial stage. Then I have to mention that the electrolyte makes up to 40% of the total cost of the system. That means if the price goes up, this could have an impact on the economics. So the consumption for vanadium is maybe close before 100,000 tons. This will grow at reasonable rates. There's one projection I read up to 130,000 tons by 2027. The steel industry is the major customer with roughly 90%. Only 2% goes into the vanadium flow batteries, and that's the reason, because it's a new technology. This has the potential to grow. Roscoe also cited that it's possible that the share of the battery application could grow to 15%. And regarding supply, most of the supply comes from steel slag. Only 15% comes from vanadium ore or from mines. The supply is dominated by China. It's always the same, 50%, something like that. At the moment, the supply is tight because it has to do with a change in regulation in China. So there is a very high demand for vanadium from the Chinese steel industry. And if there is a deficit, then we expect price increases. So that's all about the battery metals.
Thank you very much.